Thanks everyone for inviting me to speak today. So I'm going to talk about how we used our digital twin technology on a real life case study with Dublin City Council. So we create digital twin technology to help buildings decarbonise, and it takes account of some of the stuff that Ben would have shown in his presentation. So just to talk about some of the challenges with retrofitting the built environment. So a lot of councils, universities, contractors, anyone that owns buildings are going through a dilemma at the moment. Is it better to retrofit my building or demolish my building and build it to today's standards? Because there's different carbon factors that we have to take account of when we talk about that. And as more and more sustainability goals get imposed to mitigate the risks of climate change, new systems, digital twin processes, and design processes need to be put in place to make sure we're assessing the best route for derelict or older buildings. And why is this important? And just to verge into the net zero decarbonisation conversation for a second, around 80% of the buildings that exist today will still be here in 2050. This puts huge importance on retrofitting the built environment if we all want to achieve our collective sustainability goals. So we use our digital twin technology to predict the effectiveness of 4 different strategies for Dublin City Council and their social housing building stock. Now, to talk about our digital twin for a second, everyone here on the call will know, if you Google digital twin, you'll find hundreds of different solutions doing hundreds of different things. So here at IES, what we try to say is we're a performance digital twin, sustainability performance, environmental performance, ESG performance. We use our digital twin technology to assess all of those different things. So our digital twins is made up of 2 things, the physics-based simulation and real or virtual sensor data. So starting with the physics-based simulation, some people on the call here would know this as energy modeling, energy simulation, dynamic simulation. But basically, this takes account of the fundamentals of building physics and integrates it into a 3D model. And crucially, these models can take account of all of the systems within a building, all of the construction details, all of the energy flows, heat flows, ventilation flows, takes account of real weather data, and brings it all back into one 3D dynamic model. On the other side of the house is the real or virtual sensor data. So our digital twin has the ability to integrate a range of different data sources from buildings. So this could be utility bills, IoT sensors, smart meters, BMS systems, and a range of other hardware you can find in buildings. But also we can integrate in data from a number of other software sources. So there's a lot of energy management software sources, just like Ben showed. There's a lot of new AI and technology-based sources for predicting data within buildings. And we have a version of that within our digital twin as well, where we can predict virtual sensor data using data-driven predictions to replace data that we may not have. And what's the real world application of that? When you're dealing with older buildings that don't have a BMS system and aren't smart, we can predict what the operational data should be in that building. Our digital twin also takes account of AI and machine learning. Again, this is for data-driven prediction or for automatically filling in data gaps, which is always the case when you're working with buildings, or automatically checking for anomalies and sending a message to someone on site to check something or something like that. Anything to do with operational efficiency. So in a nutshell, that's what our digital twin is, a performance digital twin that takes account of building simulation, real data, virtual data, AI, and machine learning. So nice and simple. And coming back to Dublin City Council and their renovation strategies. So we wanted to use our digital twin to obviously look at 4 different strategies. And the term I'm going to use throughout this call is something called whole life carbon. For those of you who don't know what that is the combination of operational energy and embodied carbon. So when you think about renovating a building, you could do a lot of work to the building and the intended operational energy into the future will be low. However, the more work you do to the building, the more materials you will use, the more people that need to come on site. So the embodied carbon will be higher. And that trade-off between operational energy and embodied carbon is something that's not looked at a lot in the construction market. So this was the first of its kind project in Ireland when we looked at this. So we wanted to look at the whole life carbon impact over 10, 30, or the intended lifetime of the building, 60 years. The strategies that came from our digital twin obviously aligned with Dublin City Council's climate targets. And these were the 4 different strategies we wanted to look at. And again, this would be the decision making of a lot of people who owns buildings and are looking at renovation. So shallow retrofit, 1 to 3 changes to the building. Medium retrofit, 3 to 5 changes to the building. Deep retrofit, a reduction of 70% of the future operational energy. And full renovation, or demolishing the building back to its structural elements, known as core and shell, and then rebuilding the building to today's building standards. And just to give you a visual of what our digital twin looks like, you can see the 3D model of the social housing blocks there on the right-hand side compared to the actual buildings located in the middle of Dublin city centre. Okay, so some of the results. And this isn't rocket science, but this was the first project in Ireland to actually quantify some of the results when we look at embodied versus operational carbon. So looking at the annual EUI, i.e. the operational energy, you can see as more renovation takes place, the operational energy will decrease over time. But proportionally, the more work that's done to the building, the embodied carbon increases over time. Or sorry, not over time, but as you go down through the strategies and do more work. Just a couple other things that were looked at. We can see the indicative BER. That is the EPC in Ireland. And it's basically the building rating that a lot of people will be aware of when you have to assess a building during the design stage. We also did a detailed cost analysis with the quantity surveyors for Dublin City Council. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're just going to talk about it gets more expensive as the more work you do to the building, which is fairly simple. But a better way to show this whole life carbon is this graph here. And we can see it over the building's lifetime, so 10 years, 30 years, and 60 years. And here we're just combining the operational energy and embodied carbon together to see what strategy has the best carbon impact that came from our digital twin. So for the first 2, shallow retrofit and medium retrofit, there's so little work done to the building that the embodied carbon is minimal. But for every lifetime, we can see that deep retrofit was the best option for whole life carbon. And there's a really good reason for this. Even though if you knock down the building and rebuilt it to today's standards, the operational energy will be very, very good. But the amount of embodied carbon, i.e. the amount of materials used, the amount of construction work done, the amount of people traveling to site would be high. And therefore, deep retrofit was always the best option in every single lifetime looking at the building. And when you do rebuild the building, you're looking at the 60-year lifetime. So that's why it was so good there. And obviously, this shows the carbon benefit of that. But there was actually a lot of other advantages to Dublin City Council of this strategy, deep retrofit rather than new build. In terms of housing delivery, if you're retrofitting a building, it takes less time, less procurement, less planning. And there's obviously a cost factor associated as well. And these were all additional benefits besides the carbon impact that were good for Dublin City Council. And we actually created an online report where everyone on the call now can go and have a look at the whole project, and this online report will walk you through each strategy that was produced from our digital twin and all of the key results that came from it. So finally, just a few project outcomes. So as I've talked about, over a 60-year period, which is the timeline you want for a new building, each residential block can achieve around 85% reduction in whole life carbon emissions through deep retrofit.
Ian, sorry, I'm just going to cut you off. We'll make sure that the things are shared, but I know people are itching to ask you, itching to ask you questions about it as well. And Ian, similar question to you. So great to see someone tackling seriously the embodied and operational carbon at the same time. But how can you measure the accuracy of your predictions over such a long time frame?
Yeah, so as part of our digital twin process, we have to calibrate our digital twins to what's actually going on in the building. So whether that be the energy bills, whether it be BMS data, or the virtual sensor data. And this calibration process isn't something IES have created. There's industry standards for calibrating digital models to real energy. So the IPMVP, a measurement and verification protocol, or ASHRAE have a protocol for calibrating models. All of this calibrating models, calibration bits, shows that we're aligning what our model says to what's actually happening within the building. So now when we do future predictions, we're starting from a strong base. Also, our software takes account of real weather data and how that will change into the future. And we've also made predictions of how our weather will change into the future. So when we're looking at things from a 60-year, 30-year, 40-year, we can be fairly confident within 5% the calibration metric that this will happen.
And Ian, I'm just going to drop down just to give you a final similar quick-fire question. Yep. Great question here for you on the feedback. So with the results you're generating, we have the chance for evidence-based policy making. How have you been able to use that so far?
Yes and no. So we work with a lot, say in Ireland, we work with a lot of the research bodies like SAAI and a lot of people who make decisions on policy. And we usually use our digital twins to help that policy decision making. The no part, there's still, in my experience, a lack of emphasis on the embodied energy part. A lot of the design process is focused on operational energy and not thinking about what's happening during the construction of a building. So yes, we are talking to councils on how we can use digital twins, but embodied carbon is still a bit of work left to do.